This week on A to Z Running, Zach Panning is back on the show to unpack race strategy and prep for cross-country, track, and road racing.
In the world of running, an unlikely candidate sets a 50-mile world record despite only barely dabbling in ultramarathons.
How long do you think it would take someone to run across the USA? A week shorter than the last one, at least.
And baking soda is back on the menu for endurance athletes. But have they solved the GI issues? All this and more on A to Z Running.
Welcome back to A to Z Running, where we help runners thrive with information about the world of running, inspiration to fuel passion and excellence, and training and coaching services. I'm Andy.
And I'm Zach, and just a reminder that you can learn more about our services and other features of A to Z Running by going to AtoZrunning.com and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, and all the other places that things happen.
Well, we also like to see you in real life when that happens to occur. So shout out to Violet, who I had a chance to meet and run with last week, thanks to our mutual friend, Kim. That was fun.
Are you insinuating that it's not real life when people are seeing us on the show?
It's real life, but it's a different thing. It's not the same thing. But we hope to see you guys at races and things of that nature throughout the country. And I'm hoping to eventually run abroad too. So we'll let you know where we'll be, and hopefully we can meet up.
With that, let's get started with your questions. Remember that you can share a question and we will answer it on air anytime. We do this every week, 1 or 2 questions every week, and yours is going to be one of them if you share it. Or at least it might be.
Are you promising? I don't think you
No,
should promise that.
Because we can't get to every single thing every single week. However, it could be, and you wouldn't know unless you ask. And you can ask questions very easily by emailing questions@atozrunning.com, ATOZrunning.com. Questions@atozrunning.com. Share them, send them anytime, all the time.
That's the email address, by the way.
That's why I said email to questions@atozrunning.com. Like this question from Kyle. And in fact, this one in the context of a very specific training situation, which we always appreciate the context and knowing what's going on in situations so we can answer the questions even better. So Kyle was writing to us, and he says, okay, I have a Sunday rest day on my schedule. I know that you like, so we like to have one day off a week. Most of the time we recommend that. But everything depends on the individual runner. And so in Kyle's particular situation, a day off a week makes sense. And so that being the case, it's on Sunday. And at the same time, he also likes to run Sunday afternoons. So then his question is, well, if I feel good, would it be a bad thing to run like a 30 to 60-minute jog in the afternoons? Would that still be okay? So this is a good question because it's the age-old question of, if I feel okay, can I do more? Can I do more? Can I run faster? Well, actually, those are 2 different questions because we would answer them very differently. The question, if I feel okay, can I do more, which is Kyle's question here, is basically yes. Not always in every situation, but let's address Kyle's situation.
In context.
So here Kyle is building back up. He has just finished a race season and is now starting to build up toward a new season. Historically, Kyle has been running a fair bit in the last couple of years, and things like 6 or 7 days of running a week are common for him. So the idea that he might occasionally run every day of the week right now because he's feeling good is not a rare occurrence in his recent training experiences. So all of that being true, then yes, this is totally fine. And he specifically said, can I jog 30 to 60 minutes? Which Kyle knows means a very, very easy run. So yes, that is okay. That is all right to do because of all those other things. Now, if you are saying to me, I've never run more than 4 days in a week, but I just wanted to run every day this week, would that be okay? Generally, the answer there would be maybe it'd be better to build up to it a little bit first maybe it'd be better to ease into it some. Or this is the first time in my life I've ever run 6 days in a week, but I'm feeling really good. Can I also throw in a couple of hours on a Sunday? And we would say, no, that's not a good idea. So the context does matter. The main point with all of these things is that we're always trying to establish one step before we take the next step. In pretty much everything, that's what we recommend in training. But as far as volumes go, that's easier to tinker with a bit, because if you keep the efforts very, very low and you're not doing something extreme or dramatically different than what you've done in the past, then a little bit of volume fluctuation is never going to hurt you if it's very minimal effort. And you clearly are feeling good. You know, if you're feeling super run down and exhausted and tired, and then you decide, I'm going to go out and run an extra 2 hours today, that's not good. Don't do that. But that's not the same as effort. And that's where we would draw a very different picture here. If Kyle's question was, I was feeling really good, can I run a steady hour instead of an easy jog that day? The answer would almost always, in that situation, be no. And so you can see the context is going to matter. And we're not going to go into any more detail about why the answer there would be no, because you need to ask that question yourself if you want an answer to it.
Yeah.
How about that for baiting you into asking? So make sure you submit a question by emailing. Send an email to the following address: questions@AtoZrunning.com. And that'll get it.
Well, thank you for your question, Kyle.
Now let's get on to something helpful.
Today, we're excited to have Zach Panning return to the show. He's a standout long-distance runner, and last week, we spoke to Zach about his marathon specifically, and we went through the World Championships Marathon, where he was the top American. He placed 13th, but that's not all that Zach does. In fact, he is exceptional in cross country. Recently, he was runner-up at the USATF Club Cross Country Championships. He led his team to victory in college NCAA with GVSU. He has a lot of cross country accolades, and also he's phenomenal on the track. So we're going to get a chance to dive into all of these different types of racing. And let me tell you, he has run 27:51 in the 10,000 on the track. And we're going to talk about that exceptional performance too as we go into his personal insights, his stories, and advice. Let's talk to Zach. Hey, Zach, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me back again.
We had so much fun talking last time, and it just was not enough time. I needed to ask you more questions. I know my audience would be angry with me if we only talked about your marathon road racing. There's so much more to talk about when it comes to your career so far. You've had cross-country success, you've had track success, and then, of course, on the roads of the marathon. So there's so much to unpack here. And I want to specifically talk about the way that you approach different races, what things are the same and what things are different. And I thought we could start with cross country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's start with cross country. You've had great success collegiately and as a professional in cross country. Can you tell us how you approach your cross country races?
Yeah, honestly, a lot of like the shorter stuff I approach pretty similarly. It really depends more than anything on the time of day of the race. So a lot of times those cross country races will be in the morning. And I kind of have my routine set where 3 hours before the race, 4 hours before the race, I'll get a little shakeout in, no matter how early the race is. That's usually 10 to 12 minutes depending on the race and kind of how I'm feeling more than anything. If I'm feeling a little worse, I'll go typically just a little bit longer to kind of shake things out a little bit extra. Then 3 hours before, I usually try to get some coffee in, start sipping on that. I just have always drank coffee before races. I think the caffeine helps a lot, and then it also just helps clean me out a little bit for the race. So yeah, and then about an hour before, I'll typically obviously go for my a 3 mile warm up, and then jump right into the race itself. As far as eating, I'll a lot of the shorter races, I don't like to have too much. I just don't like a lot in my stomach. So typically I'll do something that is really easy on the stomach. And usually that ends up being just like a piece of toast with some peanut butter on it or something. And that'll be like with the coffee. And then right after my warm up, I'll do some sort of gel. Usually I'll do like a Martin or something. Just to give myself some calories, to kind of have my body just give it some energy. Because I know I probably don't eat enough in the hours leading up to a race, so I want to have some kind of fuel in there. So
Yeah. So how many miles do you think that you do before you do a cross country race, like all together with the morning and right before the race?
I would say it probably ends up being 4 or 5, between 4 and 5.
Mhm.
The 10-minute shakeout, I usually don't get 2 miles in that, whether it's 10 or 12, and then I'll have the warm up. I guess I do some strides, so maybe I get it to 5, with the strides and everything. But yeah, it's kind of weird that we do that, isn't it? It's a lot of running before you're going for a run.
Well, it makes a lot of sense to me because sometimes when I'm running, it takes me about 5 miles in a run to just feel like I'm in my groove sometimes. And I think a lot of like distance runners can nod along to that. Like, yes, I start feeling better the more I'm doing, the more I'm mobilizing, the body is getting prepared and it's very familiar. So, but I do think there are some people that are listening, they're like, wow, that's a lot of running. Like,
Yeah.
it's what you end up doing total for the day, but that probably the benefit of you being a marathoner and having such a high aerobic capacity and such great musculoskeletal resilience, like the marathoning, do you feel like that helps your cross country running?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it definitely, with just the strength in general, I think cross country is just, it's kind of the great equalizer, when it comes to running. Kind of mixes the strength and the speed, as you're running over grass and hills and all that good stuff. And so, it's fun to just line up with everyone, knowing that everyone has to run through all that stuff, and it's not a flat track that there's pace lights on, or a pacer even, and so that just makes it a lot more fun to just go out there and compete. The course could be fast, it could be slow, it could be short, it could be long, and that's kind of why I really fell in love with cross country to begin with, is just like the pure competitiveness of it, and the team aspect. Uh, I still get to be a part of team cross country running and racing to this day, and that's super cool for me because it's when I fell in love with the sport.
And that's pretty unique for your professional team with Brooks Hanson's Distance Project, because I think there are some teams that don't compete as a team in events like this. And I've noticed that you guys do more of the team things. And that just makes sense to me why you would choose that, since that was a high motivator for you. And you were second in 2021, leading your team in the win, I believe, right? At Cross Country Club Nationals.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, that was. I don't know if everyone listened to the podcast before this, but kind of talked about why I chose Hanson's, and that's another reason. Just that opportunity to run as a team and to push teammates and run for something bigger than myself makes it, again, easier to get out the door every day, and is a really good motivator for sure.
In cross country, it's harder to equate different times, right? Because each course is different. And unless you're returning to the same course, it's hard to compare actual times. So when you're getting into a cross country race, is your mindset more about competing, or is it equally as much about time? How do you determine how you're going to run your cross country race?
I would say it depends a lot on the course. So like if it's going to be a fast flat course, then I feel like you can lean into the time thing a little bit more. But I would say more than anything, I just go out and try to compete to the best of my ability, and kind of again judge what what my body kind of has on that day. You can kind of typically tell pretty early if things aren't feeling right. But yeah, I mean, I think cross country is definitely one of those aspects of running where it's just go out there and compete, and do it for something bigger than yourself, ideally, on a team. And so, yeah, that's kind of my mindset. Is just we need as low of a score as we can get uh, to win as a team, and that makes it so much easier to lay everything on the line, I think.
That's awesome. Now there's a lot of disruptions in cross country. Disruptions, I mean by like it's really hard sometimes to keep the same rhythm because you have rocks or turns or different terrain that you're running on. Do you have different ways you approach that or different things that you do in training to prepare for that?
I would say because we only run one or two cross country races a year, we can get pretty course specific. And so we kind of figure out what the course is like, whether it's going to be hilly, really grassy, or if it's going to be more of a dirt trail through the woods. And so we kind of vary where we work out based on what the course is going to be like. And I think that makes it easier to visualize kind of your race and how you're going to feel on those surfaces, and then get a better idea as best you can on pace, specific goals, and all that good stuff. So
This might sound really nerdy, but I come from the automotive realm. And we have something in our vehicles called adaptive variable suspension. So essentially, the suspension will soften or stiffen depending on the terrain. And so I liken that to running, and especially in cross country, you neuromuscularly, because you're training on these different surfaces, will soften or stiffen depending on what you're running on. And so it's interesting to hear how well you do and the success you have in all different realms, like in cross country and in on the track and on the roads. But it sounds like you in training vary your terrain, and that's what helps you prepare for this.
yeah, definitely like just putting your body through those types of terrains. You don't want the first time you're running on grass to be at your race, because your body's just not going to be ready for it. Same with spikes. Like I think as I've gotten older, it's just gotten harder to race in spikes, even on the track. And so when I do run cross country, I think it's important to get on grass in spikes and kind of feel that out a little bit. Let my body harden to that terrain. So yeah, I like that analogy.
So let's shift over to your track racing. And I would imagine things are a touch different. We talked last week about your run at Night of the 10Ks and how it was electrifying. There were people all over the track and they were all cheering, and you had world standard goals, and all of this was happening, right? How does that differ from like a cross country race where you might not see people as often? Do you tune all of that out? Like, or is that energizing to you? And how is that different between cross country and track?
I would say that they both definitely have aspects of that. I think the night of 10K PBs was definitely like a league of its own as far as just atmosphere, as far as people just screaming their heads off and being crazy. But I think definitely in college, I remember a lot of races, especially like national meets, where things got pretty loud and pretty raucous as well. And so as far as atmosphere, I guess it just depends on the race itself. I think there are great atmospheres on when it comes to cross country, and obviously on the track as well. I've definitely been to some track 10Ks that have gotten pretty quiet, at 11:30 at night. And so it's just about promoting the event, I think, more than anything, and making that mean something to the community and the people watching the race more than anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it depends race to race. What are some actual differences between your cross country experience and your track experience in the race or even as you approach it?
I would say definitely the track. Like our goal is time oriented more than anything. We're focused on running a time that we think that we can run based on the work that we've done. And so that gets a little more pace specific. But you're still kind of letting the race kind of play out and letting that dictate things because it is easier to run with people, I think. And so if the race goes out a little slower, you may end up leading a little bit versus there's just I think tactically the track is a lot different from cross more than anything. I think a lot of cross country is just pure everything you got. There's obviously some moves being made and some tactical strategies, I guess, but I would say more than anything, you're just purely competing against everyone around you. And on the track, I think it can become a little bit more of a jog into a sprint, which is something that I personally don't prefer. I would prefer it to be like cross country, honestly, and kind of have that pure competition that you have on cross country on the track as well. But a lot of times it ends up being, people jogging until someone decides to take it. And I would I would say that I would like to be the one to take a race in that situation, just and start running a pace that I know I can run, and that hopefully breaks up things a little bit on the track as well.
Yeah, and you had talked about in the previous episode in the marathon, like really knowing yourself. And it sounds like that ties into your track racing too, where it's like, I know I can do this. I really don't want it to come down to a final kick. So I'm willing to do what I need to do to stay in this and give myself the best shot. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah. I think it's even more elevated in the marathon. Like if people go out in a track 10K or 5K, 5 to 10 seconds faster per mile. That's something that I'll probably try and go with. Whereas I guess 5 to 10 seconds per mile faster than what I think I'm capable of. That's something that I'll probably go with. Where in the marathon, it's something that I will definitely like let go early on, and run specifically what I have trained, 12 to 14 weeks specifically for. Because I think that, the marathon, you kind of have a better idea, at least I think I do, of what I'm capable of on the day because of the work that I put in, where, you know, we're specifically training for those 14 weeks for this one day. We're not really doing anything else. On the track, I feel like you can almost race into fitness, and you just have more opportunities to kind of go after and chase a time. And so I'm willing to risk things a little bit more on the track than I am early on, especially in a marathon.
Oh, you brought up an interesting thing that I want to ask you about as a professional. There are races that are more about like times and qualifications and things like that. And then there are others where it's more about placement. Do you run those races differently? And if you do, how so?
Yes and no, a little bit. Like in those qualification type races, like those are kind of all the same. Like we go out and typically they're, especially on the track nowadays, there are pace lights and pacers, and People are going to take us through, if it's a 10K, 3 to 5K, and then we're kind of on our own. Whereas more of a championship kind of race, I kind of want the same thing where I want to get that's going to be my best way of placing high, is getting the most out of myself, as opposed to something that I let come down to a kick. I just, as a marathoner and a guy who's never been super fast over 200 meters, I just think that, leaving it to that is not the smartest idea for me. And so if things do get too slow, I'm going to try and take the race and run from the front. And if it's a little bit slow, then I don't want to be doing too much of the work at the same time, if that makes sense. It's kind of a weird dilemma that it puts you in, because you don't want things to get too slow, but you also don't want to lead too much of the race. And so ultimately, if the race goes out in a smooth fashion and it's not too slow, then I want to kind of chop things down over the last mile and a half, as opposed to leaving it to 400 meters, 600 meters, or 200 meters to go. So that was a long-winded answer, but I hope it made sense.
Yeah, it's interesting to us because, we as adult runners don't often have the opportunity to run tactically or to even run in track and cross country races. So we love hearing from you, especially since we are following the world of running and hearing your insights. And as we're watching races, we can see these things unfold and understand them more from your perspective. It's really cool. I guess to complete this, would you mind talking us through one of your best races and how it unfolded for you, either cross country or track?
Yeah. Well, I would say that my best race would have to be the night of 10K PBs. And that one I ran as smoothly as possible. We were lucky enough to have pace lights right at 28 flat. And in the past, I think I've gotten out a little too aggressively over the first 5K. And I kind of looked at this one in May as a marathon more than anything. Like, I want to be coming through halfway. Maybe even I'd rather be slow than too fast. So I'd rather be over 14 minutes and try and close than be under 13 minutes, because every time I've tried to do that, the wheels start to fall off over the last mile. And so my goal is to be right off those lights, and I did exactly that. I kind of stayed right off of those. Luckily, I had a group of guys over the first 5K, and then slowly after 5K, just slowly started to chop things down a little bit. And the last 3K was where I really tried to lean into it, and caught the lights and put a gap on the lights. And so I wasn't beating anyone else, I guess, but it was fun to chase down those lights and finally break that barrier that I'd been chasing for a long time. So
that's really cool. Well, as a runner, you're really good at chasing, either chasing people down, chasing the lights, personal satisfaction and PRs and things. And it's been fun to see how your professional career has progressed. And I feel like it's only just begun. Like, this is really exciting to be following you in the sport, because we have the Olympic trials coming up. We have more track coming up. We have the Olympics. There's so much to look forward to, and we'll be making sure that we keep our audience up to date, and we'll be checking in to see how things are going for you. Thank you so much for joining us, Zach.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Zach, for joining us on the show yet again. I love what Zach said about knowing himself and how he needs to run the race that suits him. And regardless of what the tactics might be going into it, he has to evaluate not if that's just like a good tactic, but if that's best for his strong suits. So I guess my challenge for all of you and a takeaway after this conversation with Zach is to think about your strengths and what things you want to do in training that are going to help prepare you for race day. So he talked about cross country and the different terrains. And he talked about how in the end, in the last 200, he doesn't want the race to come down to the last 200 because he's a marathon guy who also races on the track. So go through these things. Think about how you can prepare yourself best for your race day. Let's get on to the world of running.
Congratulations first to some A to Z runners doing the running thing in the Richmond Marathon. Marjorie ran about a 45-minute personal best.
Awesome job.
That's amazing.
So exciting.
I think that's a 45-minute personal best. We were exchanging some notes, and she's thrilled and ecstatic about the races. It was wonderful. Martha ran a 5K first one back in a while after dealing with some disruptions, and that's always fun and exciting. At the Dirty Duel, which is always an interesting event, got a couple of obscure distances going on there. Michelle ran, Laura was first Masters, and Dano was first age group. So congrats to you all. And Hannah dropped a 25K PR at the Loop the Lake event.
So
nicely done.
Congratulations, all.
Well, first up on the docket, we have an interesting world record performance.
Yeah.
At the 50-mile ultramarathon distance. And this is interesting for a few reasons. One, because the person who broke the record is not a name that you have heard much about in the world of ultramarathoning. Now, granted, he has had one at least decent high-up finish in a championship event. Not quite this long, though. Aside from that, when we start talking about something like, hey, someone just broke a Jim Walmsley 50-mile record, the first thought that pops in your mind would not be Charlie Lawrence. And yet, he did by 2 minutes.
So good.
Which is a very impressive bout. And also a course record at the event that he ran. This is the Tunnel Hill, whatever that one is in Illinois. It was a 15-minute course record. So wow. Charlie Lawrence drops a big one and a 50-mile distance. Why is it that everyone's talking about this? Well, Lawrence himself is a relatively unaccomplished distance runner. And I don't say
He's
that
good.
in a demeaning sense.
No.
Right. He just hasn't had like these major accolades in his career. He ran collegiately at an NCAA school and was like maybe 100th was his best finish at like a national level.
You don't know for sure.
It was like 106th.
Okay.
I mean, I did read the article. So
okay.
He had some good finishes at some like conference region level, but not much at the national level. His times are strong, but no one's looking at them thinking, where is he going to run professionally or something like that. It's not necessarily a career full of glamour. Until now. When he breaks a world record. And that's what's so exciting about these kinds of things. And so the talk all over the message boards is like, this is uncommon, uncanny type of thing. Jim Walmsley is a professional ultramarathoner. He's got tons of records. He's done like all the impressive things that an ultramarathoner, you would call it like a short distance ultramarathoner, because it's like what the Sorokin
50
guy.
50 miles is
I know,
short.
but the
That's
Sorokin
crazy.
guy has all like the crazy long ultramarathon records.
Yeah.
But Walmsley's got a bunch of them. And so at this point, for someone to come on the scene who's, kind of new to the ultramarathons.
Exciting.
He's only run a couple ultras of any distance. And here he is. He's only run a couple marathons as well. So that's
really
know
something
that's
really
fun.
Interesting.
Sure.
So there's a race, because we just had Zach Panning on the show, okay? There was a race that you, Charles Lawrence,
he was in
Charlie,
that. He was in that run.
and Zach Panning were all in that. I actually have a picture of you guys like starting that 5K together.
It did happen.
Which is kind of fun.
Did I beat Charlie in that one?
I don't think so.
I don't think
Did
so
you?
either.
I don't know.
I think the two of them I think I was third, and the two of them were in front of me. Anyway, point being, yes, it is actually true that I've met him once, but this is fun and exciting, and it speaks of more to come. You've got to assume that at this point, Lawrence is like, I'm on the scene in a big way, and I'm going to do more of this. So whatever that might mean, we'll see. And we're going to stay tuned and try to follow it because that is a fun one to watch.
Before we move on, I do want to say I'm excited to see someone who's put in so much hard work and was not necessarily, like you said, the person who you're like, well, let's watch out for that guy. Like he was the dark horse that came in, but through hard work, because he's continued to run at a high level for years, and then to emerge and to come into this distance where he's owning it is really exciting. And also that he's an American. That's super cool. We have an American that holds the 50-mile record. I mean, Jim Walmsley, he was too, but I'm just saying, like, it's a cool thing. He's representing the U.S. by having this record.
Right on. All right. Next up is another long thing. If 50 miles a long race. Well, okay. Now put on your thinking caps here. There's 2 questions that we want you to try to guess the answer to. The first is, how long do you think it takes for someone to run from San Francisco to New York City? And you have to remember that when people do a race like that, it's not a race. When people do an event like that, they are not just like running constantly. Obviously, it just can't be done. And so how much running do you think someone does a day to accomplish that type of feat? And how many miles? Does anyone know? How many miles is it from San Francisco to New York City? I'm just curious if you even have an idea at all, because that helps you get a conception here.
Can I tell them how many miles
Yeah,
it was?
let's break it down.
Okay.
Start with the total distance.
Okay, total distance, 3,048 miles.
Okay, 3,048 miles. How many miles per day do you think someone can handle in order to cover 3,048 miles of total distance? That's the question. This is awesome.
So I was thinking, before I read the full thing, I was like, oh, that's probably like a marathon a day.
You are
wrong.
so wrong.
I'm so wrong. I'm
so
wrong. Okay, go for it.
So there's a lot of ways you can, a lot of ways to eat an elephant. Isn't that what that? No.
Skin a cat.
Skin a cat.
But that's
okay.
pretty brutal.
That is pretty nasty. So is eating an elephant one bite at a time. But
that's disgusting too.
That's just the way that you have to.
On.
You create analogies to give you concepts. All right. So the point is, there's a lot of ways to go about this, but at the end of the day, you got to cover as much distance as you can every day. And so Jenny Hoffman, who I believe is a business professor for Harvard.
Oh, wow.
In her day job, she's not actually running, across the country most of the time. She decided to attempt what was at the time a 6-year-old record. But why that's significant is because the previous record setter broke a record that had stood since the 1970s.
Wow.
So it's not like people do this very often, and it's not like people do this when they do it and break the record often. That doesn't happen. So 3 people have owned this record since 1979 or 8 or something for the women. And so, as it were, Jenny Hoffman set out to try to cover 3,048 miles, averaging about 60 miles a day. That's her goal.
That's bonkers.
And so if you do the math, calculate some things here, about 60 miles a day is a little over 50 days, okay? The previous record was, I've got it here somewhere. The previous record was 54-ish days, all right? So she was setting out to just barely get the record, like cut it nice and close, because you don't want to overextend yourself kind of thing. But we're talking about, 50 days worth of running, 60 miles a day. A lot can go wrong. Well, she knows this better than most because she attempted the record before and did not succeed. As a matter of fact, she got most of the way across the country before her knee ended up some kind of knee injury.
Brutal.
Yes. So Jenny Hoffman, coming for redemption here, ends up averaging 63.5 miles per day to run from San Fran to New York in 47 days, 12 hours, and 35 minutes. For 47.5 days straight, she ran 63 miles a day.
I just can't even wrap my brain around that.
Yeah.
I was thinking a marathon a day would be a stretch, and she did more than double that.
And ran across the country in a month and a half.
That's amazing.
Right? I don't know the exact route. I was very curious about that, but I didn't want to spend the time to try to find it. I don't know the exact route, but I know that essentially it's like they plotted what is the shortest route between San Fran and New York way back when, and then people run the same route.
Oh.
When it's not like you can find a faster route, find a shortcut somewhere, and that's not really the way they go about it. Although there could be some element of that potentially at times. I don't know. But point is, that's a lot of running, and she did it about a week shorter than the previous record. So she didn't just like trim it; she chunked a bunch of time off.
Yeah, and Zach had noted in here that she's no stranger to long distance races. She has U.S. titles for the 24-hour race. So
yeah, like 4 U.S. titles in the 24-hour race.
This is something she knew she was good at. Obviously, to attempt it, you have to know that you have some great endurance.
That is something else. Right on. Okay, congrats to Hoffman and just finally achieving the record. Long overdue, having attempted it before. What a feat. All right. Last one here for today.
The controversial one.
Is it controversial? I'm going to make it controversial.
Oh.
Whether or not it is.
Exciting. Well, this is about the baking soda. We teased you with it in the beginning. Baking soda is back on the menu. People are talking about it. It's not a new thing. So why is it in the conversation again, Zach?
Well, okay. So historically, endurance athletes have known that consuming baking soda helps. It raises your blood pH, which creates a kind of buffer against essentially the negative effects of high intensity exercise, which creates a kind of acidosis because of it's an ionic charge thing. Okay, so without going too far into the science of what's happening with charged ions in your body, it's not good. That's essentially what that whole like going lactic, which is not actually a true statement at all. It's not lactic acid that's causing that problem. But the comments around that and the way you feel, the heavy legs when just like everything starts shutting down, that can be held off a bit simply by consuming a bunch of baking soda before exercise. Now, anyone here ever tried to take a mouthful of baking soda? Like mix it into some water or something and just down it? Do you know what that does to you? Do you?
Yeah. Same person you know.
I wondered if he had told you too. Maybe I told you. Maybe I don't know. Anyway, so yes, we do know someone who tried this because cyclists have been doing this for years. In some form or fashion, they have been finding ways to consume baking soda because they found out a long time ago that this is effective. The reason why, and we haven't heard about it as much in running, is because
it's horrible.
Well, no, because cyclists tend to experience this differently than runners for 2 reasons. One, because of ingesting things as a cyclist is much easier on your body when you're riding. It's easier to consume anything and ride than it is to consume anything and run, period. But also because cycling does things differently, requires something different of your muscles than running. And so for the most part, a cyclist is definitely going to see more of the benefit of something like this than runners most of the time, or at least more percentage of the time.
But the reason people don't want to take it or have taken it and decided to never, ever, ever do it again is it because it causes GI distress, like terrible GI distress.
Your brains are coming out the wrong direction kind of thing.
What was the quote?
I'm not going to say
from
his
Louis
quote.
Guevara.
Louis Grijalva at the World Championships, he mentioned that some athletes were talking about this, and he's like, I'm not going to take it. I heard, it's diarrhea. It just gives you terrible, terrible diarrhea. And that's what it did to our friend who tried it as well. So, as it were, this is not a new phenomenon. And so the question for all these years since people figured this stuff out is how can you ingest it in a way that doesn't cause so much GI distress? And Martins claims to have the answer, as they did with carbohydrates, a way to ingest without increasing GI distress. So they designed a delivery method for baking soda, sodium bicarbonate specifically. And in so doing, and this is recent, winter of 2023 is when this came out on the market. And immediately started getting it in the hands of professional athletes, right? Because that's the way you work when you're one of these types of companies. You get the people who everyone's paying attention to do the thing, and then everyone else will do it too. So
I should have asked Zach Panning if he tried it.
You could have asked him.
Could have asked him.
You could have. And so what it is, the difference here is, okay, so if you take a mouthful of baking soda, it's going to wreck you. It's going to ruin you. Don't do it. If you mix it in with certain things, then it kind of softens the blow, but still probably going to wreck you. What they've done is they've essentially created, like, you create this kind of, oh, this is nasty. It's like this goo. So you take these pellets, which are the sodium, the baking soda essentially, and you take this other kind of mix with some water, and you just stir them together, and it creates this like goopy, lumpy. So like the pellets are still there in pellet form, and the goopy stuff is
so you eat around
like
it,
liquidy Jello.
You like coat it.
Yeah, you just mix it, and then you like pudding. You eat it like pudding. Like tofu pudding, except do not chew the pellets. And so this is what Louis Grijalva was talking about. He said, I've heard horror stories about this because people accidentally bite those pellets and you're done. It's going to wreck you, right? So that's the Martin's baking soda. I don't know what it's called. They call it a system, not like it's their sodium bicarbonate system.
Yeah, right. Make it usable, I guess.
Well, here's the point. The reason why this is making headlines is because it surfaced that apparently over half the distance event medalists at the World Championships this year were taking Martin's sodium bicarbonate. So then Martin's is like, see? The best in the world are doing it, right? Now, two things. I have two things to say about that. This is why I said I was going to make this controversial. First, you read an article like this. This one was published by Let's Run, and they're quoting pro athlete after pro athlete who's like, yeah, I've done it. Yeah, I've tried it. Yeah, we did this for this thing. Yeah, it helped with it in this way, right? Pro athlete after pro athlete. Now, first of all, why are those pro athletes being asked? Because they are sponsored by Martin's, and so they have the product. They're being given the product. Now, secondly, you can guarantee that they have in a contract the exact statement that they will not say anything negative that harms the brand or the product in the contract. So what do you think they're going to say? Nothing negative,
so
which
just
means
have to try it
if
ourselves.
There's something negative that's happened because of the product, you wouldn't know about it. So that's my first thing. Like, read an article like this and think, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. That's Andy's point. Maybe I try it myself and then form an opinion. But secondly, with all of this, the main thing you notice when they are quoting all these athletes is they say, yeah, I've tried it. Yeah, I've tried it. No one ever seems to say, it's great and wonderful and works super well for me. As a matter of fact, nobody says that in any of the things that they quote, which raises a really interesting question. Is Martin's product actually doing anything helpful or different than anything else that people have tried? And of course, the answer is, we should probably wait and find out. Well, let's wait and see. These things are always just so funny to me, how they go. But here's what we know. We know for sure that consuming baking soda in a large enough quantity, and that's the challenge. That's always been the challenge. You have to have a fair bit of it for it to do this. It does create a buffer against the ionization that happens. It can prolong high intensity for some amount of time, similar to what creatine does, by the way, in a very different way, but it's a similar kind of end result effect. And at the same time, we also know that some people have gotten away with it and it's been able to be effective, and other people, no matter what they've tried, it ruins them, and so they can't do it. So you might want to try it carefully, and in a practice session, right, in a workout run.
Not all the pros are doing it either. Not all the pros are using it because, like the OAC, there were quite a few quoted in the article that said that they were not. So.
Yeah, what you have to be careful about, because OAC is sponsored by Martin's, the team.
Oh.
And so they are definitely avoiding saying anything too direct, but a number of the members of the team, I guess it's quoted in the article, so we can say, like, on their podcast that they have, and then a few other instances and interactions have said, like, yeah, I tried it in a workout and it felt awful. It was my worst workout ever. Like, things like that did happen. So it's true that it can help, but it's also just as true that it can ruin you. So tread carefully. There you go. Now you know baking soda's back on the menu, but you may not want to consume it still. That's it. That's the whole thing.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. Thanks to Zach Panning for joining us again on the show, and we'll talk to you all next week.